Elowen learned early that the people of Eldermere forgot things. They forgot small things at first, where they placed their keys, the words to old songs, the names of streets they had walked since childhood. These forgettings were laughed away, brushed aside like dust from a table. But as Elowen grew, the forgetting grew with her. Bakers forgot recipes passed down for generations. Mothers forgot lullabies they once sang with closed eyes and full hearts. Friends passed each other in the market with polite smiles, unable to remember why their chests ached at the sight of one another. Strangest of all, no one remembered that anything was wrong. No one, except Elowen. She lived at the edge of the kingdom, where fields met forest and the air always seemed to pause before moving on. Elowen had a habit of noticing what others missed, the way shadows lingered too long at sunset, the way bells rang half a note short, the way seasons arrived but never quite settled. And she remembered. She remembered her mother's laugh before it faded into a quiet smile. She remembered her father's voice, even after he could no longer recall her name. She remembered promises people no longer knew they had broken. Memory, to Elowen, felt like carrying a fragile light in a land slowly forgetting how to see. One evening, when the sky was painted in soft violets and the wind smelled faintly of rain, Elowen followed a feeling she could not name. It tugged gently at her heart, pulling her beyond the worn footpaths and into a part of the forest few dared to enter. The trees grew closer together there, their branches woven like clasped hands. Ivy crept across stone ruins half buried in moss. And then she saw it, a gate. It stood crooked and rusted, nearly swallowed by vines, as though time itself had tried and failed to erase it. Elowen brushed away the leaves and found delicate carvings along the iron bars. Roses, hourglasses, and symbols she did not recognize but somehow understood. Her hand trembled as she pushed the gate. It opened with a sound like a sigh. Beyond it lay a garden untouched by decay. Flowers bloomed in colors too rich for memory alone, deep crimson, pale gold, soft lavender. Stone paths curved gently through beds of living green, unmarred by cracks or weeds. At the center of the garden stood a single rosebush, taller than the rest, crowned by one perfect rose. It glowed, not brightly, not painfully, but warmly, as though it carried its own quiet dawn. Elowen stepped closer. With every step, her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with recognition. She felt as though she were approaching an old friend she had somehow never met. The rose's petals shimmered, layered like time folded upon itself. Within their glow, Elowen felt moments brush against her, laughter echoing from long ago, tears that had never fallen, love that had waited patiently to be remembered. She reached out. The instant her fingers touched the stem, the world held its breath. The garden fell silent, yet Elowen heard everything. Not voices, not words, but feelings. Memories poured gently into her like sunlight through glass. A kingdom once alive with joy, clocks that chimed in harmony, people who honored time as something precious rather than something to be controlled. And beneath it all, a sorrow so deep it had bent time itself. Elowen pulled her hand back, tears slipping down her cheeks though she did not yet know why. "This place," she whispered. The rose did not speak, yet she understood. "You remembered me," it seemed to say. "And so, I remembered you." Beyond the garden walls, Eldermere continued its quiet forgetting. But within the circle of roses, time stirred for the first time in many years. And Elowen knew, though she did not yet understand how, that the fate of the kingdom had found its way back into memory. Elowen did not know how long she stood in the forgotten garden after touching the rose. Time behaved differently there, as though it had learned to walk softly. At last, the glow of the rose dimmed to a gentle shimmer, like embers settling after a flame. The garden breathed again, leaves rustled, a distant bird sang, and the evening air wrapped itself around Elowen's shoulders. Slowly, she knelt before the rosebush. "I don't understand," she whispered. "But I feel as though you've been waiting." The rose did not move, and yet Elowen sensed an answer, not as sound, but as warmth spreading through her chest. The petals quivered faintly, and within their soft glow, images began to form. She saw Eldermere as it once had been. The streets were alive with color. Golden clocks hung above doorways, not ticking sharply but chiming gently, each one tuned to a different melody. People paused to listen, smiling as though time itself were singing to them. Children played beneath sunlit towers where bells rang freely, marking moments of joy instead of hours of labor. Elders gathered in the square, sharing stories not to remember the past, but to keep it alive. Elowen gasped softly. This was a kingdom she had never known, yet somehow remembered. The vision shifted. She saw fear creep into those same streets. Storms that lasted too long. Harvests that arrived late. People began to whisper that time could not be trusted, that it must be measured, controlled, bound. Hands built great instruments of brass and stone. Chains of glowing light wrapped around the kingdom's tallest clock tower. And in their desperation to save themselves from loss, the people of Eldermere wounded time itself. The glow dimmed. The memories did not scream or accuse. They simply lingered, heavy with sorrow. Elowen pressed her hands to her mouth, tears falling freely now. You kept it, she murmured. You kept what they lost. The rose shimmered in response, its petals opening just enough to reveal something hidden within, a faint pulse, steady and patient. She understood. Time had broken, and when it did, its memories had nowhere to go. The rose had taken them in, not to trap them, but to protect them. Every forgotten promise, every unlived goodbye, every moment left unfinished rested within its bloom. You remember, Elowen said softly. So others might forget. A breeze stirred the garden, carrying the scent of roses and rain. In that gentle movement, Elowen felt the rose's silent plea. If even one heart remembers, it seemed to say, time may learn to heal. Elowen's knees trembled as the weight of understanding settled upon her. She had always believed memory was a burden, something that made grief sharper and longing deeper. But now she saw it differently. Memory was not meant to chain the past. It was meant to guide the future. She reached out again, this time without fear. When her fingers brushed the petals, the garden shifted around her. The air thickened, glowing softly, and the ground beneath her feet seemed to ripple like water. The rose's glow wrapped around her, tender and certain. Elowen closed her eyes. When she opened them, the garden was gone. Elowen felt the world tilt, not violently, but as softly as a memory returning after long sleep. Light folded around her. Warmth and cold brushed past like passing seasons. For a moment, she felt as though she were standing still while everything else moved, years sliding by in silent waves. Then her feet touched solid ground. Elowen opened her eyes. She stood in the heart of Eldermere, yet it was not the Eldermere she knew. The streets were wide and clean, paved with pale stone that reflected the sun like water. Banners drifted from balconies, embroidered with symbols of roses and flowing hourglasses. Laughter echoed freely, unburdened and bright. Time was alive here. A clock tower rose before her, tall and elegant, its bells ringing in harmony rather than command. Each chime felt like an invitation, to pause, to breathe, to notice. Elowen turned slowly, afraid the vision might shatter if she moved too quickly. People passed her, solid and warm, unaware of her presence yet filled with life. A baker dusted flour from his hands, smiling as children danced in the square. A mother lifted her child high, spinning as if the moment might last forever. And in that joy, Elowen felt an ache. Because she knew how it would end. The air shifted. Clouds gathered unnaturally fast, shadows stretching longer than they should. The laughter dimmed, replaced by murmurs of worry. The bells of the clock tower rang again, but this time, the sound felt strained, as though time itself were being pulled too tight. Elowen followed the sound into the great hall beside the tower. Inside, leaders and scholars stood around a glowing mechanism of brass and crystal. Its gears turned too quickly, sparks of light flickering between them. We are losing time, one voice said. Moments slip through our fingers. We must hold it, said another. Bind it, before it leaves us. Elowen wanted to cry out, to warn them. She reached forward, but her hand passed through the air like mist. She was only a witness. Chains of light were raised. Symbols carved into stone. The mechanism roared, and the clock tower screamed. The bells rang wildly. Then, silence. The world froze for a heartbeat too long. Elowen staggered as the joy drained from the city like color from a painting left in rain. People clutched their chests, confused and afraid. Some memories shattered instantly, falling away like broken glass. Others faded slowly, leaving hollow spaces behind. Time had not been saved. It had been wounded. Elowen fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "This isn't how you heal," she whispered, though no one could hear her. "This is how you break." The vision blurred. Light rushed back toward her like a tide pulled by the moon. She felt herself being gently drawn away, backward through moments and memories, until the warmth of the rose returned. She gasped and found herself once more in the forgotten garden, hands pressed to the earth, heart pounding. The rose glowed softly before her, unchanged, patient, waiting. Elowen looked at it with new understanding. "The first step backward," she said quietly, "is learning what went wrong." The rose shimmered in agreement. And in that silent promise, Elowen knew her path would not be easy. To heal time, she would have to walk through sorrow without trying to erase it, and teach others to do the same. This was only the beginning. The garden did not fade this time. Instead, the light around Elowen dimmed, drawing inward like a breath held too long. The rose's glow softened, and the air grew heavy with a sadness that did not belong to the present, or the past, but to something caught in between. Then Elowen sensed she was no longer alone. A figure stood near the far edge of the garden, half hidden by curling ivy and shadow. He was tall but bent, as though the weight of years pressed upon his shoulders. His robe was woven with faded symbols of clocks and stars, their threads dulled by sorrow rather than age. Elowen rose slowly. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. The man turned. His face was lined, his eyes deep and weary, eyes that had seen too much and remembered too well. Around him, fragments of time hovered, broken clock hands, cracked hourglasses, shimmering threads of light that pulsed faintly and then dimmed again. "I am the keeper," he said quietly. "The keeper of time." Elowen felt her breath catch. "Then you know what happened." He nodded once, as though the motion cost him dearly. "I know what I did." The rose pulsed behind her, its light brushing gently against the keeper's shadow. He flinched, stepping back. "I asked time to obey," he continued. "I thought I could protect this kingdom from loss. From change. From endings." His hands trembled as he lifted them. "But time does not bow. It remembers." Around them, the garden shifted. Elowen saw flashes, moments the rose revealed for them both. The keeper standing proud before the tower. His voice steady, his heart burning with certainty. And then, his horror as the bells rang wrong, as memories shattered, as silence replaced song. "I stayed," he whispered. "When others forgot, I stayed." Someone had to remember what was broken. Elowen stepped closer. She felt no anger, only a deep, aching sadness. "You carry this alone," she said. "It is my punishment," the keeper replied. "And my duty." The rose shimmered brighter, and Elowen understood. "No," she said gently. "It's your regret." The word struck him like a bell. Regret curled around him, thick and heavy. Elowen saw it in the way he bowed his head, in the way his voice cracked when he spoke again. "I wish to be forgotten," he said. "If time is healed, let my memory fade. Let the kingdom forget me as it has forgotten so much else." Elowen shook her head. She reached out, not to the rose, but to him. "Only what is remembered can be forgiven," she said softly. "If you vanish, your mistake remains a wound. But if you stay, if you remember, it can become a lesson." The keeper's eyes filled with tears he had not allowed himself to shed for years. Around them, the fragments of time stilled, as if listening. "What would you have me do?" he asked. Elowen turned toward the rose. Its glow reflected in her eyes, steady and kind. "Help me heal," she said. "Not by binding time again, but by letting it move. Even when it hurts." The keeper closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had changed, not in his power, but in his heart. "I will walk this path with you," he said. "Even if it leads through every regret I've tried to bury." The rose bloomed wider, its light warm and approving. For the first time in many years, the keeper stepped forward, not as a guardian of control, but as a witness to healing. And somewhere deep within Eldermere, time trembled, not in fear, but in hope. The next morning in Eldermere arrived without arriving at all. The sun hung low on the horizon, unmoving, its light frozen in a pale gold that neither brightened nor faded. Shadows clung stubbornly to walls and doorways, stretching far beyond where they should end. A bell rang somewhere in the distance, and never finished its chime. Elowen stood at the edge of the city square beside the Keeper of Time, the rose cradled carefully in her hands. Its glow pulsed softly, like a heartbeat unsure whether it should continue. "This is where time resists," the Keeper said quietly. "When it has been wounded too deeply, it forgets how to move forward." The people of Eldermere gathered around them, drawn by instinct rather than memory. They did not know why they had come, only that something inside them felt heavy, unfinished. A woman stood with her hand raised mid-wave, tears frozen on her cheeks. A child stared at a dropped toy that never reached the ground. Even the wind held its breath. Elowen's chest tightened. "We can't force it," she whispered, remembering the vision she had seen. "That's what broke it before." The Keeper nodded. Time must be invited. Together, they stepped into the square. Elowen knelt and placed the rose upon the stone at the center of Eldermere. The instant its stem touched the ground, the glow spread outward in gentle ripples, soft, careful, as though afraid to break what remained. The first petal fell. It drifted through the air like a sigh and brushed against the woman frozen mid-wave. The tear slid down her cheek. She blinked. "I was saying goodbye," the woman whispered, clutching her chest. "I didn't finish." The second petal fell. It touched an old man hunched over a bench. His eyes widened as memory returned, not all at once, but enough to make his breath shake. "I promised I would forgive him," he murmured. "I ran out of time." Petal after petal fell, each one awakening a memory left incomplete. Laughter broke free. Sobs followed. Some people sank to their knees as years returned in a rush too strong to contain. Time did not surge forward. It wept. The square filled with the sound of remembering. Elowen stood at the heart of it, tears slipping freely down her face. She felt each memory as if it were her own, joy and grief intertwined, inseparable. But still, the sun did not move. The Keeper placed a hand over his heart. "It's not enough," he said softly. "Time remembers the pain, but it fears the cost of healing." Elowen looked at the rose. Its glow had dimmed. The petals fell more slowly now, as though each one required greater effort. "What else does it need?" she whispered. The rose pulsed once, deep, resonant, and heavy with meaning. Elowen understood. Healing time required more than returning memories. It required release. She stepped forward and spoke, not loudly, but clearly. "To all who remember," she said, her voice carrying through the still air, "you cannot change what has passed. But you can choose what you carry forward." The Keeper raised his staff, not in command, but in surrender. "I bound time once out of fear," he said. "I release it now with humility." The chains of light that had once wrapped the clock tower flickered, and cracked. The sun trembled. A breath of wind stirred. Time shuddered, uncertain, but listening. Elowen closed her eyes, holding the rose close. "Move," she whispered, not as an order, but as an invitation. "Even if it hurts." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the sun inched forward. The bell finished its chime. Time took its first step. Time moved again, but it did so carefully, as though afraid of breaking once more. Days passed in hesitant steps. Morning followed night, and night followed morning, yet each transition felt fragile, like glass warming in the sun. The people of Eldermere began to remember more with each passing hour, though many memories returned softened by tears. The rose, however, grew dimmer. Elowen noticed it first. Its petals no longer shimmered with the same steady light. Some curled inward, pale at the edges, as if they carried a burden too heavy for bloom alone. Each time time lurched forward, the rose seemed to give something of itself. She brought this fear to the Keeper of Time. "It's fading," she whispered, holding the rose between her palms. "If it disappears." The Keeper closed his eyes, and when he opened them, sorrow filled his gaze. "There is a final wound," he said. "One time cannot heal on its own." They stood beneath the clock tower at dusk, its bells silent now, respectful rather than broken. The rose pulsed weakly, responding to something unseen. "What does time ask in return?" Elowen asked. The keeper hesitated. A memory, he said at last. Not any memory, but the one you hold most dearly. Elowen's breath caught. She did not need to ask which one. That night, she sat alone in the forgotten garden, the rose planted once more in its ancient soil. Moonlight bathed the petals in silver, and the air was heavy with stillness. She thought of her mother's laugh, clear and bright before it faded. Of her father's voice speaking her name with pride. Of the quiet moments when love existed without fear of ending. If she gave this up. She touched the rose. Warmth spread through her hands, tender and sorrowful. You kept everyone else's memories, Elowen whispered. Let me keep time's hope. The rose glowed brighter, for a moment. Then the light shifted. A memory rose within Elowen, her most precious one, and drifted forward like a candle flame. She watched it go, tears falling silently, as the rose absorbed its light. Her chest ached, but she did not pull away. The garden filled with radiance. Time surged, not violently, but with certainty. The bells of Eldermere rang freely at last, their sound clear and true. The sky deepened into night, stars moving gently across it once more. Elowen swayed. The keeper reached her just as her knees buckled. Elowen, he said urgently. She looked up at him, confusion clouding her eyes. Do I know you? She asked softly. The question struck him deeper than any punishment ever could. The rose bloomed, brilliant, whole, alive. Time was healed, but Elowen's reflection within it had faded. She slept peacefully beneath the rose, unaware of the gift she had given. Around her, Eldermere breathed freely for the first time in years. Time moved forward, and Elowen stayed behind, untethered from the memory that had shaped her heart. Elowen awoke to morning light she did not recognize. Sunbeams filtered gently through leaves overhead, warming her face. For a long moment, she lay still, listening to the quiet rhythm of the world, the rustle of branches, the distant call of birds, the steady, comforting sound of time moving as it should. She sat up slowly. The forgotten garden felt familiar, yet strangely empty. The rose stood in full bloom before her, radiant and whole, its petals glowing softly in the early light. Elowen frowned. I feel like I should know you, she whispered to the rose. It shimmered gently, but offered no answer. She rose to her feet and walked beyond the garden walls, following a path that seemed to know her even if she did not know herself. When she reached the city, Eldermere greeted her with a sound she had never heard before, joy unburdened by confusion. The streets were alive, people moved with purpose, greeting one another by name, laughing freely, pausing to savor moments rather than rushing through them. Clocks chimed in harmony, their sound warm and welcoming. And yet, when they saw Elowen, something remarkable happened. They stopped. A hush rippled through the square, not of fear, but of recognition. That's her, someone whispered. Elowen's heart raced. I'm sorry, she said uncertainly. Do we know each other? The keeper of time stepped forward, his eyes shining with unshed tears. You may not remember us, he said gently, but we remember you. He raised his hand, and the people gathered closer, not crowding her, but surrounding her with warmth. One by one, they spoke. She placed the rose, said the woman who had once frozen mid-wave. She gave us our goodbyes back, said the old man from the bench. She taught us that time isn't something to trap, said a child, clutching a toy at last safely held. Elowen listened, her chest aching with a feeling she could not name. You healed time, the keeper said softly. And in doing so, you gave up something precious. Her hand moved instinctively to her heart. What did I lose? She asked. The keeper knelt before her. Your most beloved memory, he said. So that all of ours could return. Tears welled in Elowen's eyes, not from recollection, but from the truth of what she felt. I don't remember doing that, she said. But, I would do it again. The rose's glow reached them even here, its light threading through the streets like gentle dawn. As the people spoke her name, again and again, it filled the empty spaces within her. Stories were told. They told her of her kindness, her courage, her quiet strength. They spoke of the girl who noticed what others forgot, who listened when time itself cried out. And as they spoke, something remarkable happened. Elowen began to recognize herself, not through memory, but through love. Her reflection returned slowly, shaped by the way others remembered her. Not all at once, not painfully, but enough. She smiled, a soft, certain smile. Time flowed freely around them, carrying laughter, tears, and gratitude in equal measure. The kingdom had remembered her. And in that remembering, Elowen found herself again, not bound to the past, but rooted in the present. The rose did not fade. As days passed and time settled into its natural rhythm, the rose at the heart of Eldermere grew stronger. Its glow softened, no longer urgent or fragile, but steady, like a promise kept. Elowen visited it each morning. She still could not recall the memory she had given away, yet standing before the rose filled her with a calm she trusted. Some losses, she felt, were not meant to be chased, but honored. One dawn, as mist curled through the streets and bells rang gently to welcome the day, the rose changed. Its petals unfolded wider than before, releasing a warmth that spread across the garden, then beyond its walls. The light flowed like water through stone paths, along rooftops, into fields and forests alike. Where it touched the ground, new roses bloomed. They appeared quietly, at the corners of homes, beside doorways, near wells and bridges. Each rose was different in shade and shape, yet all carried the same gentle glow. People paused when they noticed them. A woman smiled, suddenly remembering a promise she had long meant to keep. A young man felt courage rise within him where doubt had lived. Children laughed without knowing why their hearts felt lighter. These roses, the keeper said, standing beside Elowen, do not hold memories. Elowen looked at him. Then what do they carry? Remembrance, he replied. Not of the past, but of what matters. Time flowed through the kingdom like a calm river now. It did not rush, nor did it stall. Seasons arrived with grace, teaching patience rather than fear. Elowen knelt and touched one of the new roses. It was warm beneath her fingers, not with magic, but with meaning. I think this is how it was meant to be, she said. The keeper smiled, older yet lighter than before. Time no longer needs a guardian, he said. It needs witnesses. That evening, lanterns were lit across Eldermere, not out of necessity, but in celebration. People gathered beneath the stars, sharing stories not to preserve them forever, but to savor them while they lived. Elowen stood among them, the glow of countless roses reflecting in her eyes. She felt whole, not because she remembered everything, but because she had learned that some truths live beyond memory. And at the center of it all, the original rose bloomed in full glory, no longer carrying the weight of broken time, but offering its quiet gift freely. Time had healed, and in its healing, it had learned to bloom. Time did not rush to prove itself. It moved as it always should have, slowly, faithfully, allowing each season to finish its work before yielding to the next. Spring lingered long enough for seeds to take root. Summer warmed the stones and softened old worries. Autumn arrived with color rather than regret, and winter rested instead of freezing the world in place. Eldermere learned to wait. Elowen grew with the seasons. She became a familiar figure throughout the kingdom, often seen tending the roses that now bloomed in every quarter. Though she did not call herself a gardener, her hands seemed to understand the language of living things. She pruned gently, watered patiently, and never hurried a bud to open. Children followed her, asking questions that did not always need answers. Why do roses lose their petals? One asked as autumn leaves fell. So they can make room for new ones, Elowen replied, smiling. Under her care, the roses became places of quiet reflection. People sat beside them to remember loved ones, to make peace with regrets, or simply to breathe without fear of time slipping away. The keeper of time watched from a distance, content. He no longer carried chains or instruments, only stories, which he shared freely with those who wished to listen. One evening, as golden leaves drifted through the air, Elowen stood beneath the original rose in the forgotten garden. It no longer glowed brightly. Instead, it shone softly, steady as a heartbeat. I don't miss what I can't remember, she whispered, placing her hand over her heart. But I think I understand it now. The rose rustled gently in the breeze. She understood that time was not cruel, it was honest. It gave moments meaning by allowing them to pass. It taught love by reminding hearts that nothing stays unchanged forever. As winter came and went, children grew taller, stories grew richer, and grief grew gentler. And when spring returned, it did not feel like a miracle. It felt natural. Seasons learned to change again. And in that change, Eldermere learned how to live. Years passed, as years are meant to do. They did not rush, nor did they linger too long. They unfolded gently, carrying laughter, sorrow, beginnings, and endings in equal measure. Eldermere grew older, but also wiser. At the edge of the forest, within the forgotten garden that was no longer forgotten, one rose remained unlike the others. The original rose still bloomed. It no longer shone with magic bright enough to change the world. Its petals were softer now, their color deepened by time rather than dulled by it. Dew gathered upon them each morning like tiny stars, quiet, watchful. Elowen visited the garden often. Her hair had silvered at the temples, and her steps had slowed, but her eyes remained clear and kind. She carried no regret for the memory she had lost, for her life had been shaped by what she chose each day rather than what she remembered. One dawn, as the sky softened into pale rose and gold, Elowen knelt before the rose. "Do you still remember?" she asked gently. The breeze stirred, and the rose swayed. In that motion, Elowen felt it, not as an image or a voice, but as truth. The rose remembered not the brokenness of time, nor the pain of sacrifice. It remembered love. It remembered a girl who chose compassion over fear. A kingdom that learned to release control. A moment when time was invited to heal rather than forced to obey. Elowen smiled. Beyond the garden walls, children laughed, bells chimed, and seasons shifted as naturally as breath. Time flowed, not perfectly, but honestly. When Elowen rose to leave, the rose released a single petal. It drifted to the earth and vanished, becoming part of the soil that would nourish future blooms. Somewhere, a child would one day discover a rose and feel a quiet warmth they could not explain. And so the rose continued, not as a keeper of memory, but as a witness to meaning. As long as it bloomed, time would never truly be lost. Moral lesson: time cannot be controlled, paused, or reclaimed, but it can be honored. When we choose patience over fear, compassion over regret, and love over loss, time becomes not our enemy, but our teacher. What we give to time with an open heart returns as wisdom. For more motivation fairy tale stories, please like, share and subscribe this channel. Thanks and God bless.